despite the narrative that is out there, is militarily the IDF have had great success in destroying Hamas. They've returned half of the hostages home, and they've secured their southern borders. There's still work to be done. It's still unclear whether Hamas will achieve victory or Israel will. In this war, based on somebody who used to teach strategy, Hamas's strategy for the war is only to survive. And if they survive the world, as in Hamas's top leadership, then they have achieved a massive victory for terrorism, for Iranian proxies, for the destruction of Israel, which is their grand strategy. For Israel to achieve a victory, it has to bring all the hostages home. It has to destroy Hamas as a military organization with the capability to hurt Israel and to conduct more October 7th, which is its stated goal. This is a unique war as well as a student of war where nobody believes the words of the other side. When Hamas says, my goal is that October 7th was just a warm up, my ultimate goal is to continue to do October 7th attacks and to build power to destroy Hamas or destroy Israel and all the Jewish people. Interestingly, nobody ever listens to them what they say, except we do listen to them when they report civilian casualties daily down to this single digit, which again, I've never seen in a war. So where we also are is that war is a contest of will. It is a battle of the narratives. And Hamas's strategy for the war also includes not defeating the IDF, not even holding ground. It is only to cause the world to believe that the IDF is intentionally harming civilians and be forced to stop, but namely the United States and the UK and others saying, you have the right to defend yourself, but Israel, you must stop. That is Hamas's strategy, and the world has fallen into that strategy through a false narrative that anything being done, as in the destruction that occurs in urban warfare, in the history of urban warfare, that the Israel is somehow intentionally targeting civilians, intentionally causing destruction, intentionally causing humanitarian crisis, whether it's starvation or water, when actually the opposite is the truth, based on from my research on the ground, understanding the complexities of urban combat, and it's actually the complete opposite. Israel has implemented more measures to prevent civilian harm, to prevent civilian casualties, to aid humanitarian crisis than any other military I've ever studied in the history of war, to include my own military, the United States and others. The World Central Kitchen event is a tragedy. Full stop. It was unintentional mistake. And the IDF, Israel, took full immediate responsibility for the mistake, which, like you said, has happened very recently in wars, to include the United States and Afghanistan, in Iraq, in other locations, in the fog of war. You never have complete intelligence. Mistakes happen despite everything you do. And in the complexity of urban combat, the risk of that is so high, even when a combatant like Hamas is doing everything it can to cause those mistakes, to cause civilian harm, to cause civilian casualties. We call it human shields. Hamas uniquely has a strategy of human sacrifice where it wants it, and again, the world doesn't believe their own words. It wants as many of their citizens to die as possible. But yes, this event was a tragedy. And what Israel did is another bit of evidence, not a report, but evidence of what a moral army, a moral country who follows the law of war does. Takes immediate responsibility if there is a mistake, conducts an immediate investigation at the national level, and then implements measures to ensure it never happens again. And that's what Israel has done. And even the US administration has said, to date, as in even after the World Kitchen events, there is no evidence that Israel has targeted civilians, aid workers, journalists, nothing. This was an unintentional, according to Israel, tragedy, and it will be fully investigated. And if required, if there was intention, but all evidence shows there wasn't, then you hold people accountable. Unfortunately, we're not only in a world that Churchill talked about where a lie can travel the world before the truth puts its pants on. We're also in a world where the entire world is looking for anything negative in this war to paint Israel as somehow intentional in any action, despite the overwhelming truth that that's not what is happening. But the world not only wants that lie to spread, it grasps at anything that even would look like Israel is causing harm when it's actually, and then fails to mention anything that the enemy in the environment does. This war could end tomorrow. Hamas would give the hostages back. It could end tomorrow if Hamas unilaterally surrendered and de-armed and gave up its grand strategy to destroy Israel and to kill all the Jewish people. But Israel has to fight the disinformation. It has to immediately, like it did in this case with the World Central Kitchen event, immediately look into whether it was them and whether and what happened, and then inform the world. It can't help the fact that, for some reason, there were immense amounts of information immediately spread across the world, but it has to fight that in that narrative. It has to report immediately what it knows, unlike any other military ever has to in the past, because of the ubiquitous access to sensors. And this is why urban combat is the hardest form of combat any military could fight, is because there's no other environment on the planet where there are millions of cell phones that can immediately broadcast and distort the truth before the truth has woken up. There is no historical comparison to the complexity of the challenges in which the IDF have faced in Gaza. The fact that you had 2.2 million civilians that were being used as human shields, that the combatant that you're fighting has spent 15 years building defensive plans underneath the civilians with the purpose of reverse engineering all modern laws of war, any step that would be taken to prevent civilian casualties in the strategy. But the numbers that, interestingly, people are trying to use to show intention, which is not the way the law of war works. The law of war works, or even to show proportionality, right? So, of course, the number is too high. It shows that Israel is not being proportionate. Well, one, that's a misuse of the term at all. Israel, of course, has every legal right to use the proportionate amount of force to remove the imminent threat to their survival in the invasion of southern Israel on October 7th and the horrible things that happened. But there is no quantitative aspect to war. There is no quantitative number that says, look, that shows that you're not following laws of war. That's not the way that it works. It is, what is the target, and only target military targets. That's the ultimate rule of law of war, is do not target civilians. And there's no evidence that Israel has targeted a single civilian. And if there are civilians in the combat area, despite what Israel has done, as in empty cities of 850,000 civilians before even beginning the ground invasion, if there are civilians, you make a decision in the military operation, is what is the military target, what is the value of the target, and what is the expected collateral damage, civilian casualties, and have you done everything physically, they actually call it feasibly, possible to get the civilians out of harm's way and to reduce the number of collateral damage. And by all evidence, every day of this war, up until today, it shows that Israel is actually doing that calculation, targeting only military targets, making an assessment of the value of the target, and they have not made many attacks, many strikes that nobody reports on, that the IDF have made a decision on. That is a military target that I value, a Hamas combatant, but I will not take it because the risk of civilian casualties is too high. That's the evidence that's been shown. That's what I saw on the ground when I went into Gaza multiple times, or 2 times now, to include Khan Yunis, that Israel is actually holding back on multiple levels so they can preserve human life, preserve civilian, and not prevent, or to prevent civilian casualties.